All right. Good morning, gentlemen. How is everybody? Great.
Morning, we're doing great.
Morning, Katie. We're doing great.
Thanks for all the great information to each of you. It was super jam-packed and really appreciate it. Um, so there's four of you. So I know there might be some interaction between all of you because one person might have one piece of the answer and the other person might have the other side of it. So feel free to engage and I'll just kind of facilitate and keep us on time. We have about 30 minutes to share together this morning. Got a whole bunch of questions here. And so feel free, I'll try and direct it. If I can't really decide who goes, you guys get to pick if one or more of you want to answer. So here we go. Okay, I'm going to go with the first question. What percentage of buyers you're working with are coming from out of state? I know you guys talked a little bit about that in your presentation. And they further say we've always been a desirable market. Has a number of buyers from other markets really changed that drastically since the onset of the pandemic? And Brian, I think you are front and center on that, and then maybe from the lending side as well. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, so I'm definitely on the leading edge of that. And we're seeing quite a few new people to town. To get the exact percentage of breakdown of percentage out of town buyers, it's a little tough to say because that does vary, but it definitely has increased. And it's increased in different sections. So if it's competition for median price housing, it's probably increased by, let's call it 25%. But if we go to the upper end luxury housing, that's where it's been most dramatic. And I would say that probably over half, if not three quarters of our buyers on our upper end right now are out of state. So we're definitely getting quite a few more people coming in. And you've probably seen it in the license plates in town. So it's been noticeable for sure.
Yeah, similar story on the lending side. Mostly all of our, well, not mostly all, but a very large percentage of the phone calls I get are from people out of state. And similar story, we were on the fence, we're looking to make a move for a while, and X, Y, or Z as a result of COVID and what resulted from it is pushing them to finally make the move. We all talked about it a bit in our presentations, but the rise in being able to work remotely has definitely impacted that as well.
Thanks for those answers. So, as a follow on to that, um, we all know this, you've talked about it all morning. Inventory is a challenge. So, at what price points in this lack of inventory are you most concerned? And I will leave it up to you folks. Perhaps I'm thinking this is residential, so go ahead, Brian, and then we'll also get into a couple of questions about commercial. Go ahead.
Perfect. Yeah. So definitely inventory is critical across. We're at a crisis level of amount of inventory across all price levels. But the one that I think is most critical and perhaps damaging to our town is the competition for entry level housing. And that's what's really tough because this has been kind of a K-shaped recovery. Mr. Basu was talking about that yesterday, where certain parts of the economy are coming back more quickly. The white collar workers weren't as affected; they could remote work, et cetera. They didn't see the layoffs at the lower end. So it's kind of it's kind of a 1-2 punch for people that are facing more effects of the COVID pandemic, and then there is also more competition in that price level. On some of our upper level homes, we have had multiple offers, but I was just speaking with a principal broker here at Sotheby's today, and there was a $425,000 house yesterday that went for well above asking price and had over 20 offers on it. And so it's really challenging for first time buyers to get a house in this market. And then what we're also seeing is increased competition. And I would love to hear some lender input on this, of cash against those. If they're going in with a loan, they're competing with cash offers, and it's just there's a lot of factors and against them, and that tight inventory and that, let's call it sub medium price, sub $600,000 range is really critical at this point.
Yeah, and you touched on it, and it's accurate. Not only are you competing against cash offers, but also larger down payment versus smaller down payment. So something like a 3% down payment first time homebuyer program is not going to stand a chance against multiple offer, even against a 20% or 30% down offer. So further making it harder for first time buyers to get in the market.
Yeah, that's very true. So I'm going to switch over to the commercial side. And Jay, this first question is for you and Bill to weigh in on. From your perspective, are there industry sectors that you fear will never really quite recover or look the same in Central Oregon? Is it office, retail, manufacturing? What is your perspective of some of the industry sectors that you are watching most closely? And the flip side of that, what industry sectors do you think are really going to thrive during and post COVID? Jay, why don't you start?
Yeah, I don't know if there's any industry sectors that I see that are not going to survive, but I think some could be repositioned or reimagined, so to speak. And in the near term, I think there's obviously uh, certain businesses that are being impacted more so than others. For example, right at the beginning of COVID, the hospitality industry was hammered. I mean, because no one was traveling and no one was staying in hotels, and same with restaurants and fitness facilities. And I think they may have some challenges ahead of them if this new 2-week order continues for an extended period of time or gets extended by Governor Brown. But some of those restaurants have been able to pivot and move to more of a takeout model that has done fairly well for them. So hats off to these local business owners for their creativity and their wherewithal to make it through these challenging times. On the office side of things, I don't see the need for office space going away, but I do think that certain businesses may kind of restructure how they utilize office space. Maybe it's more of a hoteling model where no one has a permanent desk, but people can come and go and kind of check in and log into their network when they need to be in the office. Or maybe it's a place where they can have team meetings once a week or twice a week. I think there are some companies that feel comfortable just going completely remote, but there's others that have expressed concerns about being remote because of the lack of kind of productivity or kind of synergy of having people kind of in the office together working on projects together. But I think in the near term, companies are going to need to be flexible and need to be able to modify how they do things based on what sort of government regulations kind of come down the pipe.
Bill, do you want to go next?
Yeah, that'd be, and I echo Jay's comments there. I think, like anything, I think we all need to kind of take a good hard look at our industry and our kind of business model and determine, is it still working or do we need to evolve and adapt? And we've seen some amazing stories here over the last few months about companies that have pivoted and recognized, hey, the way that we used to do things is no longer acceptable. It's not going to work for us. And we've got to evolve and adapt. And like anything else, there's going to be winners and there's going to be losers. Obviously, hospitality was an industry that was hit early and often, and is still kind of pivoting and moving through this pandemic. But even in that sector, there's companies that have done a great job in adapting and kind of figuring out what their strengths are, and certainly minimizing weaknesses. But I think we are fortunate to deal with a lot of really smart business people that have a good idea and an understanding as to what's required to survive and kind of move into this next phase. And as we kind of adapt and evolve, getting back to the new normal, whatever that might be, there's going to be some real opportunities out there. And we're seeing companies that are positioning themselves right now to, in my mind, be able to really take advantage of the situation. I don't see any industry sectors going away per se, but again, there's going to be ones that recover quicker and have kind of a new business model in place that I think is going to allow them to move forward and to do well. But Jay's comment with regards to office space, certainly I see that one area that will be tested. I think developers that can develop a more flexible office space, similar to what a lot of industrial flex looks like, where they can adapt and evolve to meet companies' needs. I think that's going to be a model that'll play out really well going into the future. But again, across the real estate spectrum, commercial real estate spectrum, I really don't see anything going away, but certainly being able to adapt and kind of recognize what your strengths are and really play up to those strengths.
So, sticking with one more question on commercial, uh, Jay and Bill, do you see a lot of repurposing of space, say from office to, well, it'd be probably unlikely, office to retail or from retail to office space as a result of the types of emerging industries, the Zoom economy, that sort of thing? Do you see a lot of repurposing going on?
I think there's certain parts of town that are primed for kind of redevelopment or repositioning of assets. I mean, the Central District is one of those locations. It's kind of Ben's original, industrial area, but over time, I think that's gradually going to transition into more of kind of a mixed use area where we might see some housing, some office, some retail, even hospitality. I just think, given its proximity to downtown, it's kind of primed for redevelopment. And some of the properties in that general vicinity are older in age and may not have much of a useful life, remaining. But there's others that I think would have a lot of character if they got repurposed. A warehouse that turns into a retail property. I mean, the box factory is a perfect example of that. I mean, that's an original kind of mill building that has been turned into a kind of a mixed use entertainment property right in the center of town. And I think there's more of that to come. But it just needs to be the right opportunity. And I think that area is waiting for kind of that catalyst development that starts the snowball kind of rolling downhill, so to speak. But it's coming without a doubt. And I think there are other opportunities around town as well where maybe, it was once an office building and it could be repurposed as retail or vice versa, but it needs to be in the right location. If you're in the middle of an office park, it would be kind of an odd or awkward place for a retail building. But I definitely think that developers are creative and they're going to look at how to maximize their properties and position them best for long-term success.
And from my perspective, I'm seeing a lot of kind of front-end development, master plan development, where they're kind of rethinking the tenant mix. And certainly everybody, I think right now appreciates the benefits of having a mixed-use property that provides multiple income sources where you're not just focused on retail or office, but there's a good kind of a tenant mix. And I think that's really benefiting some of the developers that have gone that route. And certainly the city is promoting that as well. But that's really where I see it happening right now, is kind of on the front end and discussing with developers what their development might look like. And they're certainly pivoting there as well and kind of rethinking maybe what that tenant mix might look like. So I think that's going to bode well going into the future. And that's really where I see things kind of happening right now.
Thanks, gentlemen. Let's talk a little bit about refinancing, and especially looking forward into 2021. Giancarlo and Bill, why don't you two start us off on a discussion of what you think is going to happen next year in the refinance market?
Yeah, I mean, as you saw in the presentation, most people, most analysts are thinking rates are going to stay very similar in that 3% range on the 30-year fixed. And, we've seen in other refinance booms before that there's a pretty long tail to them. I mean, there were some stats that there's still, over 20 million homeowners that can reduce their rate by 0.75%. And in most cases, that's pretty viable. I mean, the 1% number gets thrown around, but that's proportional to loan amount. So I think we're going to see a continued strong refinance market as long as we stay at that 3% range. People either have had job situations where they haven't been able to take advantage of it. And so as that hopefully stabilizes, they'll be able to take advantage of the refinance rates. But there's plenty of people. I mean, we've even seen 3, 4 years after rates have taken a significant jump down that people are still, kind of coming out of the woodwork with 4 or 5% rates. Maybe they had credit issues or something else that led them to a product that had a higher rate. And so I think there's plenty of legs to refinances going forward.
Bill, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would, certainly we've had requests, a lot of requests on existing deals to, consider a refi or rate reset. Again, the thing about commercial lending is these are all portfolio loans, so we carry the loan and certainly have the adaptability and flexibility to modify rate as needed. Obviously, our goal is to retain good long-term clients and to be fair with rate. And so we've had a number of requests in that arena, and also we've been able to kind of package a rate reset with maybe another either modification to a project or something else that's been going on. So I think we've been kind of creative to be able to work with clients and come up with a good plan that works for both the bank and the borrower.
Great. Thanks, gentlemen. So I want to move to the broker realtor side just for a moment. There are lots of questions about Zoomtown and people from out of state purchasing and leasing. So how do you see this affecting the market? What trends do you see? And I know we're talking about a short-term effect right now, which is heightening competition because it's not just us, right? It's people from all over the country that are trying to move here. But tell me what you see happening in 2021 with so many folks from out of state coming in, inventory going down, and what do you think needs to happen beyond the obvious of more inventory? What can we do to really integrate these new folks into this market? What are your perspectives? And Brian, why don't you kick it off, and then Jay, you can add the commercial side.
Yeah, those are a lot of good questions. I'm not sure if I can unpack them all. But to take a shot at this, I think we're gonna see a more consistent flow and stickiness to the people moving here than some of the other towns that are receiving this flood of people coming out of these urban cores. It's been fun to kind of, for a white collar worker to take a sabbatical in a cabin in Idaho for 6 months. But when the world calls again and needs business and when they need to get back to work, it's going to be much harder to do that. So the reason I mention that is I think that the real gains that Bend has made over the last 20 years with job growth and synergy and all that are real. And I think a majority of these people are going to stay. So what I don't see is a wave of people coming and then all disappearing again. I think we're going to be like, for a Central Oregon term, like one of those one-way gates at the side of the road where the deer can go through, but they can't come back. So I think that we're going to see those people stay. And then I think we just need to figure out how we accommodate them with housing. I personally have some misgivings about kind of the commercialization of residential real estate through short-term rental permits and effectively turning residential zoning into commercial zoning. So I struggle with that personally because it creates a lot of competition for full-time residents. But I'm an optimist, and I know that may seem naive, but Bend was built on the shoulders of optimistic people. Reinvented itself from a sawmill town into what it is now, and I believe that this crisis is going to bring out some really interesting things on the backside. As long as we've had affordable land to stamp out, lower cost residential, lower density housing, that's the lowest barrier to entry. That's what developers are going to do. But I think that when we have a crisis with the magnitude that we have right now, it's going to force some creative thought, and it's going to force some bigger money into the harder to solve problems like the Central Redevelopment District that Jay was just talking about. So I do think that we're going to have some new creative housing types that are going to be more appropriate for remote workers, part-timers, things like that, that don't necessarily need a single family house. So I'm not sure if I addressed all your concerns there, but I do see that, it may take a couple of years to play out, but I think we're going to see some creative new solutions to the people that are wanting to be here.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think, it starts with getting these people to come to town and, they buy a house or they buy a second home here. And I think there's a natural trickle down effect to the commercial side of things. And those people move here or they have a second home here. They decide they want to spend more time here. And ultimately, then becomes their permanent home. And maybe they're still working remotely, but then they give up that job and they start something here locally. I think a lot of us know Dino Vendetti of Seven Peaks Ventures, and I think he's a perfect example of someone who migrated from the Bay Area, had a presence here, but wasn't a permanent residence. Now he is a permanent resident, started Seven Peaks Ventures, and has helped kind of be a catalyst for the tech community here in town. And that's brought companies, that's brought jobs. And I think more and more people, when they come to town, will get involved with the community that way and help the community grow and help the economy diversify. There'll certainly be individuals that continue to, work remotely and not integrate into the community. But I think more people come here because they realize how this is a tight-knit community and a special community, and they want to be a part of that. They don't want to just work in their home office and not be a part of everyday life here in Bend. So I think that trickle down effect will continue, and investors will continue to look at Bend as well as an attractive place to invest and buy property because of the inbound migration that we're experiencing.
Yeah, Jay, just going to the backside of that, I think another thing is it's easy for us to be reluctant to have new people come to town. Change is hard. But I think we also need to remember, like you were just saying, a lot of they're bringing in wages from out of town. Like Damon Rudberg was talking about yesterday. We're essentially getting a lot of wages from San Francisco and Seattle and all these markets coming in, and there's fresh capital in town. So while it's creating competition for housing, which is a challenge, which we need to come together and solve, it's also bringing a lot of liquidity and money into the market that does employ our electricians and our plumbers and our car sales and all those other things. So I think that we need to kind of remind ourselves that it's not all negative when these people are coming here. It's adding a lot of vibrancy that may not necessarily be showing up right now, but in the years to come is going to be real good. And then, it's going to have great benefits. And then, of course, we're going to need to do some new citizen training on how to exit a roundabout and how to tape over your horn on your car and a few of those things. But I'm optimistic.
I concur 100%, Brian, and I am as well.
Great. That's good to hear. I'm an optimist too.
Yes, you are.
So I want to talk next, and this to engage all four of you. So we have heard a lot of stories, and each of you have shared your own experience. What is it looking like out there when offers are in play? So one of the questions here is, have there been a lot of challenges to appraisals? But there are many other points in a sale or a lease that will hang up or dislodge the process. So what do you see that's happening out there that's hanging up some of these deals and closures from happening? And then what do you see that is really unusual and has accelerated some of these purchases of homes and commercial properties? What are some of your stories out there? What's working and what's not? And I'm going to start with Bill.
Yeah, I think probably the number one thing that I, kind of remind our teams of as well is to be flexible, be adaptable, and recognize that, hey, you may start down a certain path and we've got to pivot for whatever reason and go in a little bit different direction. I think at the end of the day, just kind of understanding initially what we need to accomplish from an underwriting standpoint and being very targeted with regards to a process that and recognize that things take a little bit longer right now when a lot of our teams are working remotely and title companies are completely backed up just because of sheer volume of residential and commercial transactions. So really being kind of predicting where some of the challenges might occur and being very proactive in terms of planning ahead of time for that. what we're finding, and I alluded to that a little bit in my comments, is that we have to do, because we, necessarily, we live with these loans on the commercial side. We have to do a little bit deeper dive into underwriting in terms of maybe doing more due diligence on the tenants themselves to determine what their staying power is and how they're doing on a commercial real estate deal. It's just a lot more due diligence than maybe what we were doing before. But again, we're very fortunate with our credit quality that we spend a lot of time with monitoring existing deals, but we also need to recognize that we need to still be taking care of the new opportunities that come our way. And I give our credit team, our credit approval team, a lot of credit as well, because I think we're all kind of adapting to a new norm. But we also recognize that we've got a business to run, and we've got people to take care of, and needs to be met. And it's our goal to kind of figure that out. And so again, from a flexibility standpoint, and probably doing a lot more kind of pre-planning of the process to make sure that we get to the finish line together.
Thanks, Bill. Who wants to go next?
I can speak to it a little bit, and Bill touched on it. It's a lot of preparation, expectations, and communications between all parties. Our windows have shortened in terms of what the expectation is for purchase closing to be competitive in terms of being a competitive offer. And then, we've got a lot of unknowns. I mean, you did mention appraisals. I think personally, I've been fortunate. I haven't seen very many, if any, appraisals come in low, but that is a variable out there now, as we're seeing, offers accepted even $100,000 or $150,000 over the asking price. It's a concern up front, and it's a conversation that needs to be had between all parties, lender, borrower, agents, to see, what is the contingency plan? Are we prepared if the appraisal comes in low, what that means to the transaction? Can we still go forward in this transaction, within a reasonable with borrowers and all parties where income employment verification has to be determined ahead of time. So it's just tightened everything up a lot.
So from the broker realtor standpoint, gentlemen, Jay, what have you seen happening?
Yeah, in terms of challenges, what we've experienced, I touched on it a little bit in my presentation, but land sales have been difficult in certain instances because a buyer puts the property under contract and starts going through their due diligence for something that they want to build, whether it's for an owner user development for their own business or a speculative development, and they get to the point of the transaction where they get their construction pricing back, and it brings the deal to a screeching halt because they just can't make sense of the economics of the deal. The margins are just too thin to feel comfortable moving forward. Not in all instances, but in some. In terms of surprises, I think Bend is on the map much more so than it's ever been before with some development groups. And these are more regional and institutional development groups. And what we've experienced in the past is a lot of times institutional developers have a very kind of strict criteria that they need to meet in order to enter a market. Whether it be, top 50 largest MSAs in the country. If it's an institutional developer, you typically need to be within close proximity to an interstate. Retailer, number of drive-by trips, per day. But that is changing, and we have seen some institutional developers or larger regional developers kind of snooping around Bend, looking for opportunities for new developments. Lot on the multifamily side, a lot on the senior housing side, but also on the commercial side as well, and even some larger industrial developers in the Portland area that are now starting to look at Bend and see what sort of opportunities exist. So I think that we're going to continue to see some of that. I don't think Bend is just going to explode, overnight with huge, sky rises or anything like that. But I do think that some of these firms that may have in the past not looked at a community the size of ours now are intrigued just because of the growth that we're experiencing.
Okay, Brian, you have the last word on this question.
Okay, I'm going to just ride the coattails of everybody else. Giancarlo, you're right. It's about preparation and expectations. Expectations. This has been 2020. This hasn't been 2010. It's a brand new, vibrant metro area that is the role model for most small metro areas in the nation. And you can't come in thinking that it's 2010 prices. We've created tens of thousands of jobs since then. And there's a lot more competition. And so on the preparation end, you also just need to be prepared. And what's unfortunate is when you see people try to buy a home and they miss out on 2 or 3 or 4 homes first before they get fully up to speed with what's happening in the market. So do your diligence and understand values. And we got to remember that housing prices are arbitrarily set by the seller or real estate agent. They may be high, they may be low. But if you have a good fundamental understanding of what that home's worth, you're going to be more competitive, or you're going to step away. But it takes a lot of homework, and this market is not kind to casual shoppers at this point. So if you're meaning to make, if you're trying to make an investment, it's time to engage. As challenging as it is.
Yeah, I would imagine that's also true with not just existing inventory, but inventory that's being brought on board that's under construction. And we're about out of time, but I want to ask this last question because we've really not distinguished between construction and existing inventory. Do you see any, what are the hangups in new construction? Really briefly, go ahead, Brian. Why don't you start first?
So I wish we had more new construction, but we are seeing some new developments, which helps. And actually, new construction is a little kinder to first-time buyers because often it's not as competitive because it's not ready. And if new buyers can be patient, they can often write a contract on a home that's not going to be complete for 6 or 9 months, and they can get it with their FHA loan, 3% down, whatever, when existing inventory is more attractive to cash buyers. So I wish we had more new construction because I actually think it's a little bit more friendly on the buyer side to buyers, first-time buyers or buyers with lower down payment.
Great. Jay, is there any new construction in the commercial world?
There's some, but it has been relatively modest, as I indicated in my presentation. But that doesn't mean it's non-existent. For instance, on the retail side, there's the East End project across from the hospital. There's Roble Plaza across from Cascade Village Shopping Center. But with new construction comes higher lease rates as a result, just because, again, construction prices are high. So you have to find tenants that are willing to pay, a little bit of a premium to justify that cost. So it requires, tenants that are a little more comfortable taking that leap, so to speak. But what we've experienced is with the new construction that has been built, it's been absorbed relatively quickly. And that's on the industrial side, both in Bend and Redmond, and office and retail here in Bend. But and there will be more. Polish is working on the Petrosa project in Northeast Bend. That'll be both residential and there'll be a commercial component to that. That'll add some to the inventory. Southeast Bend is still working on their kind of master plan, but that will bring some additional light industrial and commercial land online. But I think people need to remember that when the UGB is expanded, that doesn't instantaneously create new land that can be developed the next day. It takes time to extend utilities and infrastructure out to that land and get it shovel ready, so to speak. And that time, happens in years, not months. So the land that was brought in the last go around during the UGB expansion is still kind of the wheels are turning to bring that online and make it developable land. So it's a timely process.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Infrastructure takes time and money. So Bill and Giancarlo, really quickly, your side of the house on the lending side of of construction. Any observations? And
Yeah.
then we're going to wrap up.
So yeah, we have seen, I mean, anecdotally, I've seen a huge increase in interest in lot and construction lending. It's definitely on the higher end of the market. We are going to finance, custom home builds on that end, and there's been a huge influx. And even prior to the infrastructure being there, we're seeing reservations and contracts come through on that land. So it's being gobbled up pretty quickly. And I mentioned again in the presentation, some people who aren't ready to make that transition, it's kind of a foot in the door. They're dreaming about coming to Bend in a year or 2 or 3, and they've been buying these lots and then starting the custom home process. But sometimes the financing is the easier part, and finding a builder and getting the costs together is pretty difficult. Or the cost can be beyond what their initial expectation was. So there's a lot of interest. There's just not a lot of available land out there for some of the custom builds.
Okay, Bill, you have the last word.
There we go. Yeah, and I'm seeing the same thing on the commercial side. I think to Jay's point, the lack of developable industrial land in particular is a real issue for the city of Bend going forward. And just being able to accommodate the needs of a larger scale industrial user is almost impossible right now. In discussions with a lot of our large commercial general contractors, of rapidly rising development costs, construction costs are a real issue right now, especially with regards to the financial viability of a project and making lease rates kind of match up with costs and generating an adequate return back to the investors is a real issue on some of these projects right now. And then we're also seeing a lot of the supply chain disruption actually occurring now that's been kind of building over the summer. A lot of industrial components, electrical, plumbing, things that are coming out of China and Asia that there just isn't any inventory right now. And another area that we're starting to see is a lack of appliances for multi-unit projects where they can't source appliances to finish a project right now. So I think a lot of little issues that have been out there and kind of building for a while are starting to come to the forefront. And so I think those are areas of interest and certainly concern going forward, because it's going to take a while for supplies to kind of build back up again. So anyway, just, there's some unique challenges out there, I think, in bringing a new project out of the ground right now.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, there is another hour worth of conversation we could easily have, but I've got to call it off and call it short. And I greatly appreciate all 4 of you and your perspectives and for joining us live this morning for the Q&A. So Brian, Jay, Bill, Giancarlo, thank you so much for joining us today.